the papers because we have with us here someone who will be taking a look at the papers with us. Richard Mama is Managing Director and Editor-in-Chief, The Difference, and former editor, Business Hallmark. He joins us here in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
You know, anyway, let's just go to the papers because sometimes perhaps give our viewers an inkling with so many stories to deal with in 30 seconds. How easy or difficult is it for an editor to pick a major story? Okay. Or a major headline?
Yeah, no, it's not an easy call, but then I think the major determinant is the readership. Okay. You know, what would the readership want? What would gel with the readers, you know, in that sense?
Just to use the word, what will sell.
What will sell.
Okay, lead story this morning. Let's begin with the Daily Trust newspaper, and it leads with that all-important, some would say controversial story. Doubts over Buhari's fresh $800 million loan request. And look at the riders to that story. Nigeria fast exceeding borrowing limit. That's from the budget office. Total debts hit 77 trillion naira. New requests a parting gift. That's according to the CDD. No justification to incur debt for incoming government. That's a quote. You may want to find out who said that. And use savings for subsidy removal to fund palliatives. That's according to Muda Yusuf. What do you make of all of this?
Yeah, I think it underscores the fact that we have not gotten it right, you know, because governance is expected to be a continuum. So if a government is outgoing, it has to be very considerate. In fact, from the moment the election timetable comes out, which was done about a year ago, if not more, right? That government, the outgoing government, ought to appreciate the fact that, hey, I should be winding down. You know, it's like a truck, you know, on the express. You don't, the driver does not press his brakes when he gets to where he wants to stop. If he does, road safety and everybody will be screaming. So it's the point. 1 year ago, this government was supposed to begin the winding down process, not to start fresh governing. You know, that's what it is.
As far back as 1 year ago.
As far back as 1 year ago, because it was clear you were outgoing. You were making the sound bites. I am outgoing. I'm preparing to go. The elections will be free, fair, credible, XY. But, you know, the accelerated pace of activities says, what have you been doing with 7 years? So by the time you now start getting all these requests coming at this final moment, what it says to us is that, look, you are not getting the picture that it's a continuum. Nobody wants to say, oh, this is what you have not done, this is what you must do at the final analysis. But the point is that you must begin to wind down.
But is there something that we're not getting here, sir? You know, because this is not the first time we're hearing about the $800 million loan request. We've heard about it from the Minister of Finance prior to this time. And it's the same government, you know, that we're handing over to the same political party. So is there something, is there a message embedded in what is being done by the outgoing administration?
Yes, there is. No, it speaks to the fact that you have an outgoing administration that is exerting itself, over-exerting itself in relation to both its party and the nation, right? Now, so the administration is like, we are in our own microcosm. You know, we are running things, you know, the way we want to run it till the end. No dull moment. But the truth about it is that it's a team. No team scores and wins except it plays together. And Nigeria is a team, and the party is a team.
Okay, that's a Daily Trust newspaper this morning.
Well, we hope that, you know, the team has the interest of Nigerians at heart, collectively.
That's the challenge.
Not just the party. Let's go to Daily Independent newspaper. And speaking of what sells to the editor, looks like, you know, they think differently this morning. So this is Daily Independent newspaper for you. The big story is captioned this way: 10th Reps Principal Officers tussle. Wasi. Aspirants, ranking reps reject APC endorsements. Take a look at the riders. accused Gbajabiamila of misleading Tinubu, one party over repeat of Saraki, Tambuwa coups. Akeredolu condemns party's NASS leadership zoning formula. You find all of the details on page 29. But let's process this with our guest this morning. There's been a whole lot of horse trading, a whole lot of alignments, which is typical, with every election cycle for Nigeria's National Assembly. But perhaps what seems to be different this time is the strong expression from the aspirants. I think we saw them, reject the party's proposal yesterday at the party's headquarters in Abuja. How much of altruism, the interest of Nigerians, do you see in the action of the aspirants? Or is this, just about themselves alone?
No, I don't think it's just about themselves. I think this is trouble that should not have come. It is trouble that should not have come because the National Assembly is elected to serve its own function within the entire remit of governance. Now, by the time you have lawmakers that have been elected, as it were, declared by INEC, these are going to be the lawmakers that would be inaugurated and become the lawmakers for the Federation. Now, that is where everybody else, gives them a break. Because their constituents have voted for them to go represent them. Now, this is not even discussing the issues of the constituents. Now, the next thing is that the party with the majority of seats, at least the single dominant majority of seats, wants to have its way in terms of how the governance process, how that tier of government supports the executive in rendering governance. But what goes on as we see it is that you do have to deal with the issues of what would the Nigerian people get at the end of the day. Because ultimately, this is all about the Nigerian people. And these elite squabbles, as it is, do not touch on the Nigerian people in the primary sense. But in a secondary sense, it also does. Because by the time the party starts coming out and saying, we have consulted, and these are your leaders, what the party is saying to us is that the party is bigger than the Nigerian constitution that said, let the members choose from amongst themselves. And it's dangerous, whether it is the executive that is doing it or whether it is the party that is doing it. No, these are things that are normally done in a democratic process, but they are done nicodemously. You don't call a press conference to say, these are the people we have endorsed. No. That's the point.
But how much of this character of vociferous expression are we going to see in the character of the 10th Assembly?
I think the 10th Assembly is going to be interesting. The first bite from the electoral process was that you did not get an absolute majority for the ruling party, or in the ruling party in terms of the executive. You do not have an absolute majority, so you have a diffused, legislative, chamber. Now, if the other parties are able to maintain rank, what it means then is that you are going to have more vigorous disputations over the issues of state.
But do you see that happening? Don't answer that question.
Don't.
Mr. Mama, and continue to look at the papers. We're looking at the New Telegraph and that story about the approval for loans. Buhari seeks Senate's approval for additional $800 million loan. But see why I thought we should bring that up. To fund the 5,000 naira monthly transfers to 10.2 million vulnerable Nigerians for 6 months. Mr. Mama, what do you think? I know you've talked about this. You've said it's not good, but consider the fact that some 10.2 million vulnerable Nigerians are going to be assured some benefits for the next 6 months. Isn't that good enough for this kind of request?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so because they say you don't shut the stables after the horses have bolted. This administration has had 8 years to work comprehensively at the nation's economic structure. It's okay to give palliatives to people, for some time and at some point. For example, when children are born, parents take responsibility for raising them up to when they become adults, perhaps maybe until they get a first degree or thereabout. But it is not responsible, it is not structural to continue to through palliatives in a continuous sense, particularly when you are also facing issues of economic lack. So I think the most structural thing to have done over the past 7-8 years would have been to build a more proper economy. And there is nothing in the books that says we could not have built a better economy across the past 8 years. It's just that this administration has failed in a very, very deep sense in terms of addressing the economic, the real deep economic concerns of the nation. More people have practically gone into poverty. More people have gone into unemployment. More people, have suffered, different levels of distress simply because you did not have an economy that is, you don't have an economy that is robust. And half of the challenge, yes, you can point to Ukraine war, you can point to COVID, but hey, other nations are grappling and have grappled with those issues, and they are getting better outcomes. So what it means is that you have had a poverty of economic management, and by the time you keep throwing palliatives, you are going to come up to a point where you are going to start asking yourself, are you going to put 180 million Nigerians in the palliative basket? Can you pay for it? Where are you going to find the funding for it? So it's cheaper and better to have worked on an economic model. And there are so many things. Time forbids us, but we can talk about 200 things that could have been done within the past 8 years that were not done. The road not taken is what has expanded our crisis.
All right, let's look at this bit about the environment. Oil spill, just above the nameplate of New Telegraph. Oil spill. Nigerians lose against Shell at UK Supreme Court. Now, that story continues on page 2. This matter about oil spills and indeed the environment has continued to generate concerns. I mean, there are a lot of court cases that have not even been resolved within Nigeria and beyond the shores of Nigeria. But in this particular one, where they say Nigerians lose against Shell at the UK Supreme Court, and if you look through, it says something about the filing was done outside of the time frame. Now, what do you have to say about these issues around oil, black gold, as they say, and the fact that it affects our environment and the benefits to the people?
Yeah, oil is, in my view, still playing a far too much disproportionate role in our, economic discussions. Oil is a reclining, source of revenue and wealth for nations. Yes, in the short term, we are still making money from oil, but we know, for example, the Norwegians, some data I saw in the course of the week says of the new cars that were purchased in Norway within the past 1 year, 2 years in that sense, 80% of them were electric. Now that speaks to you that if I buy an electric car, I would not fuel it, I will not use fossil fuels for it. So we've got to deal with those issues in a fundamental sense. Then when you come to the issues of spills, it's actually it's a question of economic justice, it's a question of social justice, it's a question of human rights considerations. What do we think of our people? Because we spill oil because the sanctions and the regulatory regime still permits some degree of laxity, in terms of the performance of the oil prospecting companies. If you tighten the noose, there will be better considerations for the environment. And I think until we get out of the oil age, the thing to do is to strengthen and tighten the noose, in that sense. Once upon a time, people were smoking at every point, and then a Nigerian government, I think it was Oyikoye Ransom Kuti, who came and said, no, let's work on the fact that people cannot smoke in public places, and the legislation came up. So if you tighten the noose from a regulatory framework, you would address a whole lot of these issues and avoid some of the community disputations, court cases, and all that. Yes, the oil majors may have gotten away on a technical ground, but I think there may be a return match even in this matter.
But I guess, we have to see, because it's not always about starting it, it's about sustaining it. How effective is that smoking law, for instance, that you just mentioned? But hey, the Leadership newspaper is next this morning, and look at what you have on the front page of the Leadership newspaper. 10th National Assembly leadership, Tinubu in secret talks with opposition members-elect. Don't expect us to be loyal if zoning formula stands. That's ascribed to Gagde. Expect repeat of 2015, Wasebetara won. I won't quit race for Senate President. Izunaso vows. Allow transparent process, says Joel Onowakbo. All of that packed on the front page of the Leadership newspaper. We've had quite a lot said about that. Right under the nameplate, 77 trillion naira debts. IMF warns Nigeria against more foreign loans. A lot has been said about that as well. Last one, among others, on the front page, you can't find broadcast stations. Court tells NBC. Oh, it's been a long one. What do you make of that?
Great. The truth about it is that the NBC has overreached itself in terms of the regulatory interventions when it comes to the broadcast media space. It is, when people get into government, there are two things about government. Government is an enforcer of law, right? But government is first a builder of ecosystems. Now, when you put the enforcement of law over building the ecosystem, you have a problem. Because why, for example, we're having a live, show, as it were, and so people make comments in the course of a live show. Are you going to put an handkerchief over their mouth, as it were? Now, when people make comments, what happens is that those comments are disputed. And if it is fairly disputed, that should be the end of the matter. If you want to push any other buttons, you go push them somewhere else. You don't punish the media organizations for doing what exactly is their brief. And remember that the media has constitutional provision, in fact, a constitutional mandate. If the media is not addressing issues, if the media is not debating issues, the media has made itself irrelevant. In fact, the media should be sued for being irrelevant.
For not doing
his job as assigned by the Constitution.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, just to build up a little bit on that,
Well, that's the Leadership newspaper.
That's the Leadership newspaper, yeah. But still on that story, as broadcast journalists, we should weigh in on it. I wonder if you're also following the debate over the sale of the 600 megahertz spectrum broadband, for which we're now wondering, what should the role of the NBC be, if it truly is the National Broadcasting Corporation in that regard? Should it be checking the sale of the 600 megahertz broadband spectrum, or should it stand back, or should it align with the NCC?
Yeah, no, I think you have had these interagency, issues, particularly when it comes to juicy transactions, as it were. So I think you will still have some of that. I think that what to do is to look into the remit, of the laws as have been spelled out for both agencies, right? So that we can now say, okay, categorically, these are the issues. But I think the other part of it is that all these agencies operate within a broader government framework. They are supervising ministries in that sense, and as it were. And so when you find agencies coming out, whether they are security agencies or whether they are media regulating agencies, in that sense, or even education sector agencies coming to dispute in public, it also says to me that there is not enough of inter-agency coordination within the supervising systems.
Yeah, all right. Let's take a look very quickly at this Nigerian newspaper now. 18 days to exit, Buhari asks for $800 million World Bank loan. There are other interesting stories there. There's still a follow-up on the National Assembly elections debate, which is captured at the bottom of this Nigeria. Akeredolu faults APC zoning formula for 10th National Assembly. There's also this one at the right-hand corner. Senate indicts AGF NAFDAC 45 MDAs for financial infractions. That's a page 5 read. There are quite a number of other stories on the front page of this Nigeria, but I think we're totally out of time on the conversation for the review. And
consequently, we have to thank you, Richard Mama, Managing Director, Editor-in-Chief, The Difference, as well as former editor, Business Hallmark. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Truly appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Well, we get into the issues right after now. Please stay with us.
Contestants for the speakership position of the 10th National Assembly from the All Progressives Congress stormed the national headquarters of the party for a crucial meeting with the party's National Working Committee.
And that is where the language...
They are led to the meeting by the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, and the issue on their mind is the zoning arrangement for the seat of the Speaker.
What makes you think that what you have done will stand the test of time? I don't know if it's going political lineage. I think I'm a better person in terms of leaders of Aswaji family because I came under AC from 2007 until when we had the merger. I've served you as deputy leader of the House. I'm now serving you as deputy speaker of the House of Representatives. If you are going to do anything, what makes you think that we're not qualified?
We are not against our leaders. But if we should sit down and say, okay, sit among yourself and pick somebody you know you can work with, it's easy. It's easy. But the person the Speaker is trying to even pick, there are some of our colleagues in the same assembly that even don't know him, sir.
5 of the aspirants were at the meeting, and they want the party to do something about the situation to avoid past experiences.
If not, sir, because of the integrity of the members of the State Working Committee, the real language in our letter is that we are rejecting. We are rejecting what is in circulation. It is unacceptable to us. We are independent bodies, sir. National Assembly cannot be turned to be like a Federal Executive Council where you pick whosoever you want to pick for. It can't be run like that.
If we stuck our neck and lost lives in defense of our party, and when it is time for reward, I believe it is the state that has delivered that should be given the right of first refusal, and not the excuse that was being peddled. That is, Abia State does not have a governor. And so whatever leadership position comes to the Southeast should go to Abia. I think it is demoralizing.
The group documents their petition against the zoning arrangement, which the party's national chairman promises to give some consideration.
I plead with you in good conscience to give us a little time to take a good and better look at your presentation and open our ears and eyes the more.
The National Working Committee of the APC had on Monday officially announced the zoning of the seat of the Speaker to the Northwest, with Mr. Tajuddin Abbas as the consensus candidate.
The Constitution talks about the existence of the Senate and the House of Representatives with a mandate that their leadership would come from amongst themselves. They would have to decide who their leaders would be. But since after the elections, we've seen speculations here or racing here and there for the leadership positions in the 10th National Assembly. Beyond those that will emerge as the leaders, what are the tasks ahead of these leaders? Are these tasks even being considered in the desire to lead the 10th National Assembly? Well, these are some of the questions we'll be asking today, and in the studio is Mr. Clement Nwankwo, Executive Director, Policy and Legal Advocacy Center, PLAC. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Nata.
So the elections have come and gone. I mean, howbeit there are contestations in the courts, but we've seen a lot of conversations around who's going to lead the 10th National Assembly for whatever reason. I am hoping, and a lot of Nigerians will be hoping, is to see a National Assembly that will carry out its 3 primary functions: lawmaking, oversight, and effective representation well. Let's see. Just give us your perspective on these race for those leadership positions before we get into what they should be looking at.
Well, I wish there wasn't a race. Parliamentary democracies or legislative democracies develop and practices get well established in some of the climes from which we received our representative democracy as we do today. And in those advanced democracies, you don't have this constant seasonal squabbles for leadership. And we've seen recently the U.S. elections that happened in the fall of last year.
Are you sure there are not those things, those conversations or contests are not there? Is it not possible, possibly because they are not in the public space?
Let me arrive.
Okay.
You do have those places, and Nancy Pelosi, in her 80s, was Speaker of the U.S. Congress when the Democrats were in the majority. And not being in the majority, she was also the leader of the opposition, so to say. And when you did have that the Democrats lost their majority and the Republicans took over, there was a question of voting for whom the Republicans have decided is their leader, McCarthy. There were almost 6 votes to get McCarthy elected. And it wasn't a vote or contestation between him and anybody else. It was simply to get everyone to get the buy-in to support him. And I think that we need to come to that point in this country where we don't have this constant seasonal squabble, because it destroys our democracy. The quality then of the leadership becomes a major problem. But you're right in your introduction. The leadership or the leadership of the National Assembly, each of the chambers, should necessarily emerge from election by the members themselves and not from interference from anybody else. It is from amongst the members that they can tell years ahead who would be their leader. If you noticed with the Republicans, Trump wasn't necessarily satisfied with McCarthy, and he is the leader of the Republican Party as we speak. But he wasn't necessarily satisfied, but he didn't and had really no powers to stop McCarthy or even dictate who would be the leader of the Republicans in the U.S. Congress. So we must come to a point in this country where leadership is established by agreement amongst all of the members, because they're all peers, they're equals. What we have seen, of course, is that when somebody emerges as Speaker, President of the Senate, in some ways they become overlords, and membership becomes subservient to this person simply because too much powers are given to presiding officers, powers to appoint committee chairman, membership of committee, favors, privileges, and so on. This shouldn't be the case. If you notice as well, who becomes a committee chairman in established democracies has long been laid out. So when you do have, for instance, the chairman of a committee, when a particular party is in the majority, their role reverses when they lose the majority, and they become like shadow chairmen. Okay. So who was chairman Foreign Relations Committee in the U.S. Congress when the Democrats were in the majority immediately reverses that the person who was in the Republican Party prior to the elections in November last year now goes back into being the shadow Foreign Relations Committee chairman. And that's the way it works everywhere. So in some ways, I think we need to come away from where we are. And that's where we are, using those words, simply because there's too much privileges, too much arbitrary powers in the hands of presiding officers, in the hands of even committee chairmen against members of the committee. So my hope is that at the end of this contestation, because you can't stop what has been let out of the bottle right now, we must begin to develop some practice that makes it possible for us to determine and know well ahead who a presiding officer would be. And
you know, they do have their rule books, and they will tell you that they have rule books by which they operate amongst themselves, which is also the rule books are guided by the Constitution. So they are within the ambit of the law to carry on their functions, or to carry on putting themselves together to do the tasks for which they were elected. But let's step back a bit and look at what exactly do you think? I don't see where people who are going to serve, who really want to serve, are fighting themselves to serve. For instance, they say, who's going to sweep the house? I don't see the children fighting. I'll be the one to sweep. No. Most times you see that when there's something to gain. So let's look at it. What should the 10th National Assembly be really looking at as they prepare to come into office? I mean, they've started their inductions, and I know a lot of them will be watching us right now, but what should they be thinking about, individually and collectively? What should they be looking at as they come in to serve the Nigerians?
I think it's really to fully exercise the powers of the legislature as entrenched in the Constitution, and those powers are enormous. If you notice, I think it was a couple of years ago under President Jonathan, the head of an agency, and I would mention that specifically, the Securities and Exchange Commission, was sanctioned by the National Assembly, by the House of Representatives. And that sanction included the National Assembly exercising its powers of withdrawing budgetary allocation to that commission. But the system worked in a way that that particular commission was able to function using or being given monies by a different agency. This shouldn't be the case. The powers of the National Assembly to give or allocate zero budget to an agency or commission should be such that it helps to enforce accountability and the powers of oversight of the National Assembly. So I think that the National Assembly needs to get to the point where it is able to exercise its powers and sanction an agency of government that violates that exercise of its power. The problem is when you do have members elect a presiding officer or leadership that hasn't been chosen from amongst themselves, but have been dictated to them. And that, I think, is what you see with the reaction. Certainly, the party with the majority should have the constitutional powers to be given the privilege of electing its own presiding officer for the National Assembly, and as well, leadership of the committees. What we should see is that leadership that emerges does not become subservient to the executive. And we listened to the outgoing president of the Senate talking a few days ago, responding to criticisms of the National Assembly being rubber stamp. I think people say that when they see that there are things that the National Assembly should do that they don't do. And the executive comes up making requests for loans, and you simply say, yes, carry go. The executive nominates persons to positions. You don't ask questions. And that's why you had what you had with Adamawa State, where a resident electoral commissioner went rogue. And that's why you have so many resident electoral commissioners who are party members being appointed. National Assembly didn't do its job. And that's part of what influenced the outcome of the elections, that you appoint partisan elements into the Electoral Commission. So you should have a situation where the National Assembly exercises its powers without necessary recourse to the executive. You did see a situation where the executive recently had spent money running into trillions of naira and goes to the National Assembly to approve after the fact. You are seeing a situation as the government has a few days to leave office. It's asking the National Assembly to approve $800 million loan from the World Bank. The government is taking decisions, the executive is taking decisions that the National Assembly is not responding to.
You know, I I would ask you this question, but I'll put it out there so that you're thinking about it, even though my colleagues are coming. How the citizens who are being represented by these legislators should have or should be reacting when it comes to this matter of a rubber-stamped National Assembly. It also means that the citizens are not doing their bit. But let's get to Lagos. My colleagues have questions for you. Ayo, Buki.
Well, thank you, Nyota. A quick question on that one, Mr. Wankwo, and it raises a lot of questions when you talk about the fund. We'll come to the executive angle that you mentioned a little bit earlier. The fact that you said the National Assembly didn't do its job is a very, very concerning one. But it also brings to mind the Director General of the NILS, that's the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies, saying, and I quote, "Legislative aides have been reduced to performing non-specialized and sometimes debasing jobs, such as holding the bags of members and picking phone calls. Some have described legislative aides as thugs for politicians. This is an erroneous conception of aides, which, according to him, are supposed they have experience in legislative duties and they could actually help the legislators to do a good job. But here we are now, irrespective of whatever agenda we set for the lawmakers, without the experience from their legislative aides, I don't know if they'll be able to do anything." So what would you say about that relationship between the legislators and their aides over the years in the performance of the jobs of the legislators?
Thank you, Ayo. I think that part of what you learn from being an experienced legislator is that your tenure as a legislator becomes meaningful by the quality of legislative duties that you perform. No legislator has exclusive knowledge of all of the issues, and that's where you have the requirement or the provision for them to appoint aides, and some of them have those powers to appoint as much as 5 legislative aides, some 7 legislative aides, depending on which arm of the National Assembly that you are elected into. The National Assembly Service Commission, which hires these aides as recommended by the members, sets out criteria and qualification for these aides. And you would notice, and it's not all legislators, there are legislators who are excellent in choosing their aides and who decide the nature of apportionment of responsibilities to those aides. Of course, those legislators who are serious, who make those conscious decisions about the quality of aides, tend to deliver much better. They go into the National Assembly, they have a vision, they have a mission, they have the aides, but beyond the aides, they also know that they can tap into resources available from several support groups working with the National Assembly. For us in PLAC, we do provide some of those support as well, and we do have very, very good legislators who take advantage of this. We also know that the National Institute of Legislative and Democratic Studies provides training when these aides are hired. And of course, the nature of training or reception of that training depends on who has been hired. But I know NILS, the DG of NILS was saying what he was saying from the perspective of the fact that NILS exists to train qualified staff. Because if you hire an unqualified staff, then it doesn't matter the nature and extent of training. Some would find it difficult to learn in a field where they basically don't have the basic knowledge to be able to do as much as they should. So at the end of the day, it boils down to the individual legislators. Some want to contribute greatly to the National Assembly and actually do so. Some decide that it's a period to compensate persons who had worked for them and worked for their elections, and so they're not so concerned about the quality of those they have hired. And that always impacts on the nature and quality of delivery of their legislative responsibilities.
Which raises the issue, Mr. Wankwo, because you just said, you began by saying that the NILS or the National Assembly Service Commission sets the criteria for the quality of, or the qualifications, so to speak, of the legislative aides that would be hired. Could you give us an idea of the minimum qualifications, so to speak, of the people that have or need to be hired by the legislators in order to be able to do a fair enough job? There are those who say some of them are civil servants of grade levels between 10 and 16 or thereabout, but can you give us an inkling into that? Perhaps that will help Nigerians understand why we have either the quality of laws or none of it over the years that we've had.
I think that, of course, you do have a university degree or college degree that is always underlined there. But, you know, when you look at what's going on in channels, in the Sunrise program, the quality and the excellent job that you are doing isn't necessarily dictated by the fact that you all have a college degree or university degree. It's basically that even when people have the basic qualification of a university degree, they should have the abilities to deliver on the responsibilities that you have entrusted on them. So it's not just the paper qualification. And you did see that begin to happen, again, going back to the US Congress, where because you have had persons trained, not necessarily that they've come with a university degree. The U.S. Congress, I think there were a couple of legislators who questioned the qualification about college degree and focused and decided, I think a representative in the Congress recently decided that she wasn't going to hire someone with a university degree, but she was going to hire someone who has great knowledge, great experience with legislative responsibilities. So it's not just so much a university degree. In our climate, in our environment, that becomes important if you want to deliver really well. But you must also look at those who can help you. And we do have people who have come over time. Legislative aids, Plaque, for instance, deploys in consultation with the National Assembly interns on a regular basis. Those interns have acquired knowledge of the workings and functionings of the National Assembly, and they would be very well placed to assist legislators to get a full good grip of what is going on in the National Assembly, especially for new members of the National Assembly. But for old members of the National Assembly or returning members, certainly they do understand the implications of the responsibility of being a legislator. And it goes again to the question that in Nigeria, you don't have a lot of returning members. In this election, we had, 70% attrition rate, so only just about 30 former members are coming back to the 10th Assembly, which should not be the case. It should be that you have members who have established themselves, who have shown the quality of their work, being returned on a regular basis. That way you would have institutional memory. You would not have novices coming to the National Assembly because, quite frankly, they would spend the first half of it learning how the National Assembly works, learning where the corridors are, and so on.
Just a second, Mr. Wako. Do you see that as a problem? I mean, 70% of new lawmakers is what you're talking about now. Do you see that as a potential problem, particularly because, as you say, they don't have that much experience and they literally have to learn from the people that you say you're training? Do you see that as a problem, in the potential problem in this 10th Assembly?
I think it could be a problem, yes, if you have novices coming in who have a lot to learn. And I think, yes, sometimes people say, oh, some legislators don't deserve to come back anyway. But the reality is, if you have new members turning in all the time, the legislature is going to keep being weak. It's going to keep being a tool manipulated by the executive who understand the human mind and how they can be manipulated. So I think think it's a problem that this country has such huge turnovers. And I must again go back to the question that the political parties, that's where we should go back to, need to be able to set up a system that enables the best to show up and be elected. The idea that people have to squabble with the political parties to get nominations, sometimes pay bribes to leadership of political parties to emerge as candidates and spend so much money to delegates to be able to emerge, is a weakening indicator respecting the choice of the best candidates for elections. Again, beyond the fact that you have a 70% attrition rate, you also have the fact that in the House of Representatives and the Senate, the number of women who are in the National Assembly are being decimated on a regular basis. I think that for a country with such large representation in the legislature, it is deeply, deeply worrying that you do have only very, very few women being elected. In fact, an embarrassingly low number of women being elected into the legislature. These are concerns that political parties need to take into account, deciding that you must have the quality of representation that is needed such that the best comes out as candidates from your party, but also that you give a space for women to participate in decision-making. For me, I think it's sad where we are with the level and extent of women representation. It is embarrassing.
Indeed, Mr. Nwankwo, and we hope that in the 10th Assembly, the conversation on the gender bills will be reopened. But you also make a very, very important point about, the weakness of the Assembly when we continually have new members. And we have a sizable number of new members elect in this 10th Assembly for the upper and the lower chamber. I wonder if you see that as a problem that may affect their ability to wield their block vote in order to ensure the election of a leader that will uphold the all-important independence of the National Assembly. I wonder if you see that, as a problem.
It is a problem. First to say that, yes, it is important that, going back to the point you make, that it is important that we do have a playing field that allows the emergence of more women, because the whole question around, and again, when I talk about when there's a conversation going on about the gender bills, I think that there is only really one major bill affecting the female gender in the National Assembly, and that's the bill to increase by constitutional alteration the nature and level of representation of women by creating additional seats. I think if I was a legislator, a female legislator, that would be a major pursuit within 10th National Assembly. We must, by constitution, create additional seats for women. Once we can do this, you will find that there will even be much more increased representation of women, because the women will be encouraged to vie for the seats that they are competing with men for. Secondly, I think that, yes, there is, like you said, the concern about the new members coming in. I think that when you do have new members, they tend to be impressionable, and that's why you have seen the new members being the harvesting field for votes for those who are aspiring for leadership or presiding officer positions in the National Assembly. If you did have returning members, these issues would be well agreed even before elections happen, that this is where or who our leader is, and it would just be really a matter of routine that who becomes Speaker, who becomes President of the Senate is decided well ahead of the inauguration of a new session of the National Assembly.
So amid all of these contestations, especially from the aspirants in the race, do you see any one of them, that is best suited to uphold the independence of the National Assembly that you talk about? Do you see any one of them, or will this concept of party supremacy, will it, trump even their contestations amid as we prepare ourselves for the elections?
It would be difficult for me to speak about any particular one, but I know that the most effective, most respected presiding officers are those chosen by the members themselves. They would have security of tenure because the members have made that decision. And we did see the example of I think it was the inaugurating session that led us into the Fourth Republic in 1999, where in the House of Representatives you did see 2 speakers in that session. In the Senate, you did see 4 presidents of Senate in that session. A lot of what that was happening because the executive was deciding on who would lead the legislature or not. But you would see in subsequent years where the National Assembly emerged from amongst the members electing themselves. And you did see in the Senate, of course, David Mark being one of the longest reigning presidents of Senate. You did see the stability of tenure that happened when Governor Tambuwal was Speaker. Speaker Yakubu Dogara was Speaker. There was that security of tenure of those presiding officers. But I worry that if you do have a situation where the executive tries to dictate, even if it muzzles through in getting their nominees, and I don't know why they should be nominating anyway, but in putting forward a candidate, that candidate may suffer from the issues of security of tenure. So the most effective ones would be really those who the members of National Assembly have elected from amongst themselves.
Okay, Mr. Nwankwo, we have to go. We've talked about the National Assembly, and that thought I planted earlier about the role of the citizens. Now, 3 functions of the National Assembly: lawmaking, representation, oversight, right? But in representing the people, what should the citizens be doing as this 10th Assembly prepares to come in?
I think the citizens need to be focused on what is the expectations they have of members of the National Assembly. Let's not forget the National Assembly does not perform executive functions, and that's something that we need to build this democracy to help the members to better deliver. The expectation that you have that members of the National Assembly will pay your personal costs, attend funerals, attend birthday parties, and so on. For me, that's what worries me about even thinking about going into the National Assembly. I wouldn't be able to function in that way. My role as a legislator would be, how do we get the best laws? How do we review existing laws? How do we hold the executive to account? How do we ask our people the question to get things done in the way that should help them? I worry, for instance, about the whole concept of constituency projects. The executive and the legislature have not been able to work out the best ways to deliver on constituency projects. And I know that this is a long conversation, but the idea, the idea that you would have a legislator wants to do road in his constituency and have that project put into an agency of government that has absolutely nothing to do with building roads, and you have the executive allow that to happen. That, for me, I think is troubling.
All right. Thank you. I'm sure this is a conversation we will still come back to, but thank you so much, Mr. Clement Nwankwo, Executive Director, Policy and Legal Advocacy Center, PLAC. Thank you for coming in this morning.
Thank you.
All right. Sunrise Daily will be back in a moment. We're still staying with the legislature, but from another angle. Don't go away.
The Duchess International Hospital opened its doors in October 2021. The mission of the hospital is to reverse medical tourism. We take particular care here at the Duchess to bring together a combination of the brightest and the best locally, as well as Nigerians in the diaspora who are interested in returning to do very good work for the benefit of our patients here in this country.
The good thing is that we have all international expertise here, all international facilities here, international people working here. Everything is coming together in a space which was considered not great in terms of the availability of healthcare.
Access Bank, of course, has been able to provide us with a robust range of products and services that has enabled us to deliver that standard and quality of healthcare that is integral to our mission as an organization.
It is with joy and gratitude to God Almighty that I, Senator Hope Uzodinma, the Governor of Imo State, on behalf of the government and the people of the state, most heartily welcome His Excellency Professor Yemi Oshibajo, the Vice President of Nigeria, to the flag-off of the hydrographic survey and dredging of the proposed sea route from Oguta Lake, Orashi, Dejema Atlantic Ocean. I am happy also to welcome the Chief of Defense Staff, General Lucky Irabo, the Chief of Naval Staff, Vice Admiral Awal Gambo, Minister of Transportation, Mr. Mohazu Sambo, Minister of Trade and Investment, Otumba Niyi Adebayo, and other prominent Nigerians to the momentous event. Date, Thursday, May 11, 2023. Venue, Oguta Lake. Time, 12 noon prompt. This is a historic moment for the people of Imo State and Southeast as the project will enhance the economy of the region and boost revenue generation. Signed, Senator Hope Uzodinma, Governor.
Now, the announcement we made was the outcome of this protracted consultations and engagements with the leaders of our party and stakeholders, including many of those who have expressed aspiration for these offices of presiding officers of the incoming 10th Assembly. Now, yes, within the rubric of that engagement, yes, the issues of the zones were offered as recommendations. But the party went beyond that to indicate the preference, the outcomes of these consultations, and some of the what was emergent consensus of these leaders and stakeholders in terms of the individuals and the aspirants who have expressed their interest, to vie for these offices. We at the APC, we thought it's necessary to actually go a step further because the field already, as we see it, was already getting very heavy, and just to give some to sort of reduce the scope of contention.
Welcome back. Staying with the leadership of the National Assembly. So the All Progressives Congress has gone ahead to, leadership of the All Progressives Congress has gone ahead to make its decision zoning the different principal officers to different regions of the country, with specifics as to the preferred candidates. You've seen the many reactions from those who are contesting and from within the party and from outside the party. Again, it appears to be like this is contrary to what the Constitution says, but there's another angle to this whole matter, and even ties to the fact that representation in the National Assembly and in politics, so to speak, is less than what it should be. I mean, as at 2022, for instance, a survey that was done points to the fact that only 5% of Nigerian lawmakers are women. Fortunately, there's one woman contesting for the position of Speaker in the National Assembly, and she is in the studio this morning. Please join me to welcome Honorable Miriam Odinaka Onoha. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. Good morning, Nigeria.
She's a member representing Okigwe North Federal Constituency in Imo State. Again, welcome.
Thank you.
So, it's been going on here and there. Who will be Speaker? All of you have come out to say, I want to be Speaker. So let's start from there. Why should you be elected by your colleagues as Speaker?
Well, I've presented myself to be the next Speaker of the House of Representatives because I qualify and I possess the requisite requirements and qualifications to lead the 10th National Assembly. I bring on the table fresh ideas to tackle Nigeria's problems, pragmatic solutions to our issues of dwindling economy, mass poverty, unemployment, and threats to constant threats to our national security. I also will bring on the table solutions and possible inclusivity and diversity, which reflects our true nature in the Nigerian state.
But with all of this you've put out, your party chose to, yes, your region was also represented, Southeast, so to speak, but they chose specific individuals, and you're amongst the team that went to the national headquarters of your party to say, no, we, in quote, reject this plan. Are you not going against party wishes? And I mean, it's been said that the party is supreme.
Well, beyond party supremacy lies also the burden of diversity and inclusivity. I would say that the coalition of progressive speakership as aspirants, COPSA, which I am a member, rejected the zoning formula as contained in the paper reeled out by my party, the All Progressives Congress. And like you saw in our protest visit to the NWC yesterday, which was well received, the letter in itself talks about the need for further and better consultation with stakeholders. I am a stakeholder. We in the COPSA coalition are stakeholders. We were not consulted. The issue here is not about me or about anyone on the coalition, but the fact that the basis and the tenet of true democracy is government of the people, for the people, and by the people. And if we are part of government, which also strictly regulates the operations of the Constitution in a view to making laws, representation, and oversight, effective oversight, which you clearly know about. Starting on the right footing would be very, very wrong, especially given it impetus by the political party, which ought to know best how to avoid this and a repeat of what has happened in the past. It's not just about the people being listed on the paper, appointed and being foisted on us. It's about the way and manner in which their selection was made. We were called to the villa some time ago, before the State Assembly and governorship elections, to intimate us with the way forward on the leadership of the 10th National Assembly. We were informed by the party leaders and the Speaker of the House of Representatives that there was need for everyone to go back home and face the governorship and state houses of election, houses of assembly election, procure it, and then come back so that we continue dialoguing and arrive at the possible best position. That in itself meant that we were supposed to be a part of deciding which zone, if zoning were to be put on the table, which zone would get this, which zone would get that. And if that got to a particular zone, then the people of the party from that zone were to be given the opportunity to call themselves to a meeting and call the aspirants from that zone to decide but who should take what, but not zoning to an individual like it were political appointment.
Before my colleagues are itching to step in here, but before I bring them in, I need to ask you this question. You are at a disadvantage, so to speak. I mean, being the only female, also considering the fact that the number of women in the National Assembly and the House of Representatives is really, really low. And you are pursuing the #1 seat in the Green Chamber. Are you not thinking that you might be pushing against the wall?
16 years ago, a woman named Right Honorable Patricia Ite was elected Speaker of the House of Representatives. 16 years after, and I'm here. I don't think it's a new feat. It's been done before. So it's not a new thing. It's not news. We pride ourselves as the giant of Africa. Yet we are nowhere when it comes to the number of women participation and representation in the assembly. You can look at countries like Tanzania, Uganda, South Africa, where women are currently the speakers. They are in Africa, yet we say we are giants of Africa. So I don't see us taking a lead among the Committee of Nations and stepping in the right direction. And mind you, the number of women in politics, in parliament, and in their hierarchy, it's a yardstick to measuring the country's adherence to the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's a measurement index for us. So you can see that by a abysmal 5%, we are nowhere compared to these other countries I've reeled out who are over 46. It's something that should worry us at this time. So if you say that as a woman aspiring to be the #1 person in the House of Representatives, I qualify, I'm a ranking member. I am considered to be the topmost in this team. But why I'm here today is not just about talking about why I qualify or the qualities that I possess. Of course, politically, to rise to this point and to survive the tsunami of the general election and be here as a woman from the Southeast and of the All Progressives Congress, delivering over 66,000 votes for the presidential candidate in an election that was keenly contested, will tell you my character and steel when it comes to grassroots politicking. And that brings me to the reason of the yardstick for the selection of the names that were on the table.
Okay, let's just hold it there. That my colleagues are coming in to ask you some questions, but we'll come back to these things. Ayo and Buki, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Nyota. And, just to follow up on Nyota's point, Honorable Onoha, it's, a good thing, an encouraging thing for other female aspirants and other female politicians looking on to, taking on public offices, that you are, running for speaker. But just to probe your aspiration a little further, before you, Honorable Nkiruka Onyo-Jiocha also aspired for the office of speaker, and she boasted of having, the support base at that time in the election, but her aspiration didn't go quite far. I'm wondering that, are you running just out of courage that you want to try and test your popularity, or can you boast of the support base across party lines in the House of Representatives that will see you occupy that seat?
Well, I'd say to you that I'm not just running for the sake of running, but I'm running to win the election because I qualify, and I have the backing of the majority of the members-elect from across several blocks who are really ready and willing to take the risks with me. I have presented my scorecards and my 7-point agenda and my manifesto to my members-elect. And I tell you, members are tired of hearing or going through the same stories and issues that we went through before. I think everyone is ready and on the verge of taking on this assignment from a different and realistic perspective, this time pragmatic, in a way that we bring fresh ideas that addresses the concerns and yearnings of the Nigerian people. I am seen, amongst others, as one who possesses these qualities, going by my track record and my antecedents. But here, and this morning, I'm not just talking about myself, but the fact that the political party where I belong and come from, along with the 6 other progressive speakership aspirants, have frowned at the manner and approach with which the issue of zoning the party leadership and presiding positions have been engaged by our political party. And respectfully, we have objected to it. We have protested about it. And we are in a democracy where, as enshrined by the Constitution, as Chapter 4 and Section 33 to 46, where I'm allowed to freedom to participate and maintain my dignity of persons. I feel that that paper reduces my dignity as a woman to nothing. We're in a country that is being touted to be the giant of Africa and a signatory to the UN and the Charter and Bill of Rights. The 35% affirmative action, which Nigeria has further revised into a national gender policy, is completely, totally neglected. That paper being peddled negates the ethics and ethos of our party and the Nigerian Constitution. It lacks diversity and inclusivity. And I am here lending my voice alongside other progressives as speakership aspirants to condemn it in totality and speak to the consciousness of other members-elect to arise to their responsibility to take our destinies in our hands. To elect a National Assembly, a 10th National Assembly that will be awake to its responsibility, that will speak to the yearnings and aspirations of the Nigerian people, taking up issues of urgent public importance and responding with the right intervention therein. We don't want a National Assembly that will be subservient to a person trying to build up another sort of cabal.
Honorable Honora,
talking against or speaking against.
Honorable Honora, that document, pardon me if I may come in here, that document that you quote, some would say is only as strong as it goes in theory, but not necessarily in practice, considering what Nigerian female politicians are up against. And some would say that as a woman member-elect, you're running against the tide because of a National Assembly that is not just ethnically diverse, but also religiously diverse. So considering all of those real-time factors, the cultural ethos in the Assembly, would you say that the National Assembly is prepared, the lower chamber is prepared for the leadership of a female speaker?
Well, 16 years after the first female speaker was elected, I don't think it will be in the news or anything to talk about to say if the National Assembly is ready or not to receive a female speaker. The point is that the woman in question, is she qualified? Does she have the requisite knowledge and experience? Have garnered hands-on experiences on the job in my first tenure in office. And this is only a demonstration of my fundamental human rights and as also contained in the rules of the House to present myself to be elected by my colleagues. If in my federal constituency I broke the jinx to be the first woman to be elected to represent that constituency and also return, it means that there's something different and tangible and cogent which my people have seen that has made them repose such huge level of confidence on me. And mind you, I'm the only female representative from that state and a whole lot of other states. That brings us also to the situation in the House of Representatives. I have presented myself to different caucuses in the House and members individually. And everyone, majority of the members I have interacted with, seem to see what they desire in me. And that's even more impressive now that we're moving as a bloc and as a movement. And I tell you, when you talk about movement, intimidation of members, harassment does not come to bear. You remember the recent Peter Obi movement where people and prospective voters from Lagos were intimidated and other states. Did this stop Labour Party from winning Lagos? No amount of harassment or intimidation or on intending voters of the opposition or other blocks of the members-elect will stop us from getting the majority of the votes cast on the inauguration of the 10th House of Assembly. The future is here before us, and I bet that we should watch and see what happens. The Nigerian people and the majority of the members-elect are with the coalition. And I repeat again, I'm not here to market only myself, but to say that there's strength in the inclusivity and diversity I find in this group of 6 respected and respectable gentlemen and myself, who are willing and have resolved to take our destinies in our own hands in protection of our nascent democracy. This democracy that was bequeathed on us by our forefathers must not die in our hands.
You speak confidently about the need to uphold the independence of the National Assembly, but the current speaker we see, at the high point of legislative decisions, during this outgoing 9th Assembly, was accused by the CSOs of working with the executive to truncate the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, the veto, power that the House ought to have wielded on the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. If, as Speaker, you were presented with that kind of, tested situation, what guarantees are you providing Nigerians and indeed the incoming 10th Assembly that you would uphold the independence of the lower chamber?
The only way to achieve and for Nigeria to attain independence of the legislature is allowing members-elect to elect by themselves, as contained in the House rule, their leadership by their own self. If that happened in the 9th Assembly, then we would not be where we are today, where the outgoing speaker insists to run the 10th Assembly from wherever with a group of people, building a dangerous cabal capable of dashing the hope of Nigeria on a perceived and proposed and prospective renewed hope, which is expected to bring an answer to the needs of Nigerians. And we are here to come to the rescue. We will not allow that group or that formation to take what rightly belongs to the rest of Nigerians.
Well, the question actually was, if you can respond to it very quickly, what would you have done in that situation? Because no one can really predict what will happen after you get into office.
Well, if I get into office, I would put my feet down.
I mean, in that situation,
with the right leadership.
In that situation, what would you have done?
In consultation with, that's what I'm saying. I would put my feet down, and in consultation with the right leadership, which we are about to form with this coalition, to ensure that the right thing is done.
Okay,
and
the question,
I say again,
well, I think you've quite expatiated on that, but the question that I wanted to ask you is, I mean, the agitation that you are bringing up about female representation at the top or in governance, politics, the National Assembly, and all of that. There are two categories of people or groups that I would have expected that this agitation would have been presented and hopefully even bought by them first of all. Your political party, the APC, seems to have written or unwritten a position on gender neutrality or gender balance or inclusion, as you put it. And then the National Assembly itself seems to have that kind of a position, so to speak, not just in the number of people of females that come into the National Assembly, but in the quality of representation or acknowledgement that is given to the National Assembly. In terms of getting these two groups on board, so to speak, what are the challenges and how can we redress them?
Well, if I got you correctly, starting with the political party and the reflection of what they have exhibited on the letter admitting the persons that they had selected to man the leadership of the 10th National Assembly, we have expressed total rejection of the content of that letter, which in itself contained the need for further and better consultation, having excluded the need for gender and women inclusivity. I had asked the National Working Committee of the party in our meeting yesterday if it was a great gift what was offered the women and persons with disability who are considered to be vulnerable, a 50% rebate in the nomination and expression of interest form, wherein you gave us this gift with the one hand, and now you're trying to take it away with the other hand. If you gave a 50% rebate, it meant you wanted an opportunity to encourage more women and the participation of the vulnerable group. Now I have emerged as a person in the vulnerable group community, and I am flagrantly being denied the opportunity of even being erroneously included on the list, which might have somehow provided some sort of legitimacy on the list. Even though I would not have ascribed to that being a Democrat, I would have preferred a situation where all aspirants were brought on the table. Stakeholders from across the regions of the regional organs and the national organ of the party sit down to Georgia and talk about where best these situations positions are situated to accommodate the different peculiarities of our diversity and inclusivity of the gender cadre, but that was not done. And then on the area of the issues or challenges I'd had with the inclusivity or acceptability in the National Assembly by members-elect, in this 10th Assembly, that is not the issue. The thing with politics is about its dynamism and the constant change in form. And the change in the form of the composition of the 10th National Assembly is one that you have even the majority of the minority party. And that in itself is a warning to the majority party where I belong, so that we don't throw up unnecessary arrogance, but present ourselves and come to reality and the realization that the time to come back to the negotiation table is now, so that we can reconsider some of the mistakes that we have done. I tell you that there are alignments and realignments of persons who are perceived to even be following members or the anointed people on the paper. It's being considered as an affront on the faces of many. Let me tell you, no matter how beautifully painted some candidates appear to be, the manner in which you emerge adds or reduces to the legitimacy or otherwise, and the possibility of failure of those candidates' emergence. And in this case, the failure is what is being expected of anybody whose name appeared on that paper.
Honorable Onoha, we're completely out of time, but I need to ask you this. In 2022, April, there was a court case, a court judgment that ordered the government to reserve 35% of appointments for women. Real quick, do you think that case, that judgment will stand and will favor especially the female lawmakers in the 10th National Assembly?
Well, it breaks my heart that Nigeria, with about 49.5%, about half of its population as women, and about 44.4 million voters being women, and another 35 million of this population as persons with disability, considered as the vulnerable group. So it breaks my heart to see that Nigeria is at war. From the paper, when you are in court, it means that the two people are on a face-off. It is shameful, it's highly regrettable, it is abysmal, it is least expected of a government who is seeking to position itself amongst the Committee of Nations. How do we face ourselves? When you talk about America, we are borrowing from them. With a Nancy Pelosi, where we still look at women here with scorn. And you could see that. Even allowing the women to put together papers and summons and take a country that is expected to protect her to court. It is something that I find it difficult to come to terms with. And this is a clarion call on the Attorney General of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and the President, President Muhammadu Buhari, to come back with the Minister of Women Affairs and sit down and pull that paper out of court and seek for out-of-court settlement. It is ridiculous that at this point and time and age, we'll be talking about litigations with Nigeria and the women she is supposed to protect. I am ashamed.
Let's hope that the shame will be cleared out real quick. Honorable Miriam Odinaka Onoha is a member representing Okigwe North Federal Constituency in Imo State and also an aspirant for the speakership position in the 10th National Assembly. House of Representatives. Thank you so much for coming in this morning.
And the incoming Speaker of the House of Representatives.
We wish you well.
Please give your support to the coalition. It's a movement.
Okay. Sunrise Daily will be back in a moment, and we will not be looking at the National Assembly per se, but don't worry, they still feature. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back shortly.
You are cordially invited to a one-day roundtable dialogue on nation building and democracy titled The Imperative of Participation, Equity and Equitable Development of Northern Nigeria, coming up on Friday, May the 12th, 2023 at the Ariwa House Banquet Hall, Kaduna State. Time is 9 a.m. prompt. All participants are expected to be seated by 8:30 a.m. The objectives of the roundtable discussion is to highlight and deepen conversations around roles and the place of Northern region in strengthening Nigeria's democracy and fostering nation building through key players and partners of the region. For inquiries, call Ibrahim Ayuba on 080-222-9972 or Honorable Yaya on 080-3390-3332. This event is powered by Democratic Research Institute, DRI, towards excellence in governance.
Nigeria has limitless potential in every sector, a people of boundless creativity and zest for life. The hand on the plow is pushing towards domestic competence and self-sufficiency. Unfortunately, Nigeria spends billions of dollars on the importation of foreign goods and services annually. By doing so, we give away our jobs, local and foreign direct investments, which puts so much pressure on our currency. This trend can be reversed if we all consume what we produce. We need to grow what we eat, savor what we rear, and take pride in made in Nigeria products and services. This will boost our economy and mitigate the effect of global economic distress. Patronize Nigerian products and services to grow our economy. This campaign for the patronage of Made in Nigeria products and services is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment.
Request for approval for additional financing of the National Social Safety Net Program scale-up by the National Assembly. It is with pleasure that I forward the above subject to you. Please note that the Federal Executive Council, FEC, approved an additional loan facility to the tune of USD 800 million to be secured from the World Bank for the National Social Safety Net Program, and the need to request for your consideration and approval to ensure early implementation. Copy of FEC extract attached. The Senate may wish to note that the program is intended to expand coverage of shock responsive safety net support among the poor and vulnerable Nigerians. This will assist them in coping with the costs of meeting basic needs. You may wish to note that the federal government of Nigeria, under the conditional cash transfer window of the program, will transfer the sum of 5,000 naira per month to 10.2 million poor and low-income households for a period of 6 months, with a multiplier effect on about 60 million individuals.
Welcome back. Looking at the economy and the game. It's not a game, and the play with the National Assembly, how they both intertwine. In the fourth quarter report of 2022, the Debt Management Office said Nigeria's debt hovered around 46.25 trillion. Specifically, the total domestic debt stock was about 27.55 trillion naira, while the external debt stock was at 18.70 trillion naira. But despite this level of indebtedness or debt profile, the current administration has written to the Senate requesting approval to borrow from the World Bank about $800 million to help or cushion the effect of subsidy removal. Now, what would this impact have? I mean, we talked about it, the reactions to this request by the executive to the National Assembly, all manner of reactions. But we have in the studio here an economist, public policy scholar, and a former presidential candidate, rather, in 2019 elections of the Abundant Nigeria Renewal Party, Dr. Tokwe Fashoa. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nyota.
Dr. Fashoa, the last time we spoke, you had not studied deep enough to be called a doctor, but you've gone ahead to, well, so to speak.
No, that's been done since more than 2 years.
That's why I said the last time we spoke. I was talking to you.
Oh, okay, yeah, welcome back to
but let's look at this. For one who's been, you've had these conversations about the Nigerian economy and what's being done over and over and over again. We've heard from the DMO in 2022 talking about Nigeria's debt profile. With that kind of profile, and these new requests, so to speak, we heard the Senate President reading that letter from the executive requesting for approval to borrow $800 million. Considering also what that $800 million is meant for, it's supposed to touch approximately, I want to get that figure correctly, some vulnerable people in the society. 5,000 or thereabout will be shared amongst these vulnerable people. About over 10 million people are going to benefit from that. If I get the figure correct, and I stand to be corrected. But you're not happy about that. You're not even smiling. I mean, hearing this.
Well, I'm smiling.
Because the economy, you've talked about the economy of the individual impacting the economy of the nation.
Right.
So why shouldn't this go ahead?
Well, I think the real problem I have with it is the fact that it's the purpose for which it is meant to be deployed. It can only be inflationary. And we've heard that too many times. We heard that over COVID, X amount of money given to X amount of poor people in some place, right? And at the end of the day, we don't see the salutary impact. We should be doing life-changing things in Nigeria. I've studied quite a bit about how the Chinese have been able to take so many people out of poverty, what they call the targeted poverty eradication program. And it's fundamental. They go right to the basis of it. They take the data. They know what the needs of different households are. Mm-hmm. It's in all history about poverty eradication and what have you. It's never been about sharing money. So I vehemently disagree with what the government is trying to do. Based on the fact that they want to share 5,000 naira for 6 months. To 10 million households, which intends to impact about 50 million or 60 million people, because maybe 5 people per household. 10 million households, 5,000. I mean, what impact will 5,000 naira have? So I think we've got a big problem. And again, of course, the government is rounding up, this administration is rounding up in about 19 days or 18 days. In 18 days, if they collect the loan, and legally, it is meant for such handouts, it's going to bind the next government, the next administration, to continue down that line for at least 6 months. And I think this is not a proper way. It's not if you like, appropriate way of spending money at this stage. Not even for the purpose of, subsidy removal. It still won't work. I believe we've got to the point now where we need to remove the subsidy on fuel. Almost everybody has agreed on that. We've seen that, look, there seems to be some black hole between 3 to 4 trillion or even 5 trillion every year that we're pumping money into this. Whenever the NNPC sells the crude, they use 90% or sometimes 100% of the proceeds to buy fuel
and which they sell at a discount, and that money goes into that black hole. So we've agreed. However, how do we proceed? I personally have written on that in some of my articles, and I've suggested, for example, one critical way, one thing we can do, rather than pumping money and saying that money, helicopter money that we may not be able to trace, why don't we say, for example, the payee, the pay-as-you-earn, personal income tax law can be amended very, very slightly such that every worker in the private and public sector gets something back in their pocket, apart from those who are top earners, maybe guys like you. But if somebody is earning anything like 1.5 million and below, you grade it. The guy earning 1.5 million, even if all you are giving him is maybe 10,000 naira back, you're doing. But as he comes down, 5,000 naira in the pockets of someone who earns 50,000, which you're giving back as payee, it's something. And this is like, you're increasing his transport allowance. So by that, in that mode, you're going to be taking care of a huge chunk of people who work, whether in the public sector or the private sector. So you have to talk to the states who are in charge. I mean, the states collect most of the PITs and so on, payee. You talk to them and say, guys, this is what we're going to do. The money you're going to be giving up by way of payee, you're going to get back by way of an increased FAC allocation, because now whatever is sold by the NNPC comes in directly and we're not paying subsidy anymore. You can also work on the CIT, company income tax, and you're going to be achieving two things. By reducing company income tax a little bit for every company, you're putting some more money back into the hands of each company. You can then tell them, look, we have done this so that you can also retain your staff. You don't have to sack staff. You can employ even more people. And we are promoting your businesses. You can do a lot more. So in which case, so why are we not talking about that? Why are we talking about that kind of very base idea of we want to go and give some family, which, we have a problem with our data. We went and did trade that money. We don't know where the money ended. We don't have data of who was the market money, all sorts of things, COVID money. And now we're talking about this 18 days to the... So on that basis, I will not accept. The only reason, the only window in which I may be able to say, okay, maybe we have something here, will be if they said, okay, look, this money, we're taking this loan and it's targeted towards subsidy removal. However, we're going to leave the next government to take a decision about how it to be spent, because we could use that money. $800 million is about 400 billion naira, okay? The subsidy we're trying to eradicate is about 4 trillion naira, 3-4 trillion naira. If you're borrowing this money, you can say that apart from the payee and the CIT that I mentioned now, you want to use this 400 billion naira now to incentivize the states. How many buses can we buy from Innocent for each state, which are going to be maybe subsidized public transport? Even though that's not particularly very efficient, we've done that in the past. How much can we give to Lagos State to further improve its metro system? Which other state wants to begin to start a metro system? Fundamental investments in infrastructure that will be lasting, so that we can walk away finally from this subsidy quagmire, and do something new. But certainly not this idea of, it's the basest idea, is the most colorless idea I've heard in a while. But of course, I think in this administration, not many fantastic economic ideas are floated to the top. So this is going to be like some sort of climax. Okay, or perhaps call it anticlimax to the raft of uncooked policy, if you ask me, that we have managed to plow through over 8 years.
Talking about this is a way of giving back to the Nigerian people. One second, but you move this conversation to the tax regime in Nigeria.
Yeah,
there are not many people, and there's data to prove that there are not many people that are paying this tax, so to speak. The companies are not paying as much.
You're paying, aren't you?
I am paying.
I'm paying as well.
And my organization is paying taxes as well. But then, what I'm saying, there are not as many people paying taxes as they should be.
Should be.
Instead of encouraging, you're now saying, would this idea now of giving back, how would that encourage people to pay tax?
Exactly.
When the government is also considering bringing in more tax regimes.
People will be encouraged to pay tax because you are reducing the burden, all right? So when you reduce the burden, but then again, it depends on government communication. Government is now going to be saying that, listen, we've given you guys so much. We've said, okay, you know what, we've put money back in people's, and then the government will have the impetus, whether the state government or the federal, for enforcement, all right? So, in fact, you know what, there are many companies in the private sector now who collect this payee from their staff on a monthly basis, including NHF, Housing Fund, including even NHIS, and they don't remit. And that's a crime against the state. So if the government is going to be saying, look, we want to reach out to people. I mean, you pay payee, I pay payee. Let's look at the number of people who are in paid employment in this country. In the public service alone, we have about 2 million. And we're looking at, we're talking about plus police, plus army, including, the federal government, federal civil services is less than 100,000, truly. Then you look at all the guys who work in oil sector, in banks, in private company. We're probably going to be taking care of about 10 million people through that. And imagine that if the lives of those 10 million people were better, there's a trickle-down effect to their family members and what have you. Look, that's the best way you can begin to say, we have given something back. And then you now say, look, we need to enforce to ensure that if companies collect payee from their staff, it must be remit. We're now beginning to go in one fell swoop. We're now beginning to pursue the revenue to GDP ratio that we say is so low. Okay, and I heard Mr. Akabeze, speak yesterday or the day before about our low, of course, the fact that the debt, maybe become an issue, and that our revenue to GDP ratio is still very small. Indeed, it is. However, I believe there are so many levels of control that we can begin to use, okay, to increase that revenue. By all means, across the board. We should be targeting doubling the revenue to GDP ratio in this country. But one thing we can do, but we have a subsidy problem. One thing we can do is to incentivize every worker first and foremost. Then we now know that, okay, we now have to deal with the informal sector. People who don't pay taxes, people who are artisans. How do we make their lives easier? That's where all of the subsidized transportation comes from. But again, as I said, we've bought buses in the past and all of that. After a year or two, they break down. Go and see Abuja Urban Mass Transit. There's a yard where they park thousands of the buses. But we can think differently now, and I think it's time for us to start to think differently about this issue.
How do we incentivize the Nigerian worker? There was a time where there were housing, there were state housing estates, federal housing estates that reduced cost of rent, but now you don't find those anymore. You're talking about incentivizing the worker. How do you incentivize the worker? You're giving them back money. You're putting money in their hands. But that money,
it's like you're increasing their salary.
My colleagues in Lagos are about to come in.
Without having to, there's this 40% they're playing with. Again, that's another, half-cooked idea, I'm sorry to say. We don't begin to leap in that kind of... Even this 5,000, if you're giving households, all you're doing is that money, you're just going to increase inflation across the board. But if you're saying that, listen, okay, what we're trying to do is you're looking at increasing your transport allowances for those who work. And for those who don't work, okay, what can we do to begin to build sustainable transportation infrastructure across the board? Lagos may decide to put it in their inland waterway and buy a few more ferries for people. Other states that don't use ferries can begin to think in that regard. 400 billion is not particularly a lot of money, but it will help. It will help if it comes, but certainly not by putting the money, just 5,000 in so-called families' hands and so on.
All right, I am Bukola.
Well, thank you, Nyota. Let me begin, Dr. Fasho, and thank you so much for the issues you've espoused so far. Well, Bukola and I were having a conversation here about this whole $800 million money. So just help us understand first, has the money been collected or it is yet to be collected, waiting for the approval of the Senate?
What I heard so far is that the money, that the FEC has approved for the collection of the money. I'm hoping it hasn't been collected. And that what the president was seeking
could have been collected.
The imprimatur of the Senate to go ahead and collect.
Dr. Fasho, just 1 second. Has it, you said you're hoping it hasn't been collected. Is there a likelihood that it could have been collected before the letter is sent to the Senate?
Well, I can't speak to that. That's the apparatus of government. Is left for them to deal with. Okay. But of course, look at, maybe people will be suspicious, and I think that's why there's anger in the land, unfortunately. Okay. For example, the case of the Ways and Means is still around the corner.
Which is where my question is, Dr. Fasha. Just a second. Which is where my question is. The Ways and Means conversation. Just 1 second. Let me come through on it. First of all, there are those who are saying, in the first place, over the years, over a long time now, the CBN has overreached itself by going past the constitutionally approved threshold of how much it should have collected in the first place. There are those who are asking the question around the CBN governor or the CBN overshooting the limit of 5% granted by the CBN Act, Section 38, by printing more than 23.7 trillion naira instead of 500 billion naira. That's an issue, isn't it? How serious is it in this whole ecosystem?
I wanted to tell you, no, it is a serious issue, but I'll quickly tell you that, look, every country was in that box, okay? Perhaps not in terms of the illegality against their laws, but every country was in the box of, you know, leaning on the central bank, especially through the time of COVID, when there was no work and no revenue collection. Every country did that, okay? But I'm not speaking for central bank. They will speak for themselves. However, also the 500 billion that you mentioned is a bit over bloated, because the 5% was specific as to the federal government revenue. So last year, the inland revenue collected 10.1 trillion. Out of that 10.1 trillion, perhaps 50-something% belongs to government, the federal government. So maybe 5 trillion. So yeah, you now look at 5% of 5 trillion, which is about 250 billion, max 300 billion. So 500 billion, we're being generous with that 500 million. So it's about, however, when you now look into history, you find out that in 2015, when Buhari government came, the account was overdrawn up to 790 billion, between 790 and 900 billion, meaning that even under the Jonathan government, that account was overdrawn. If you go back, you probably will find out that under
just 1 second, Dr.
the
Fasha.
Yar'Adua government,
We'll come to the 2015, the pre-2015,
so of course,
the debt stock. Just a second.
Yes.
But the issue you just raised, now, which you stated, I'd like you to speak to it. And who should be taking it up, really? Is that the job for the National Assembly? You said that, yes, every country in the world was at the mercy of its central bank, but not to the level of illegality. Now, that illegality angle of it, who should be dealing with it? Who should make an issue of it? Or would you say that by extension, the National Assembly, the 9th National Assembly, failed in its duty of proper, adequate, efficient oversight of the CBN in this particular regard?
Well, of course, if they failed, they have also, at the end of the day, had to capitulate and, you know, say, okay, you know what, we've seen all the... I mean, they asked for details from the central bank. The central bank gave them details. They came back and said, you know what, they didn't want to approve before. But now we can go ahead and approve for the central bank what it has done. Because what happened was that amount was outstanding in the books of the central bank as mere overdraft, which had messed up the balance sheet of the central bank and by extension the balance sheet of the country. By what they have done now, that amount has been reclassified in the books of the central bank away from mere overdraft. When the bank gives an overdraft and is unpaid, you begin to talk about issues of bad loans and so on, you know, and issues of write-offs. But now it has been reclassified as a bond, perhaps as an asset in the book of the central bank that will be collected over, repaid over 40 years. That perhaps the best we can do is just an accounting classification. That amount could hardly also be taken to the public to be sold as bonds. The proper securitization, it would have had to be rated by a ratings agency, perhaps local and international, and then would have to sell off to members of the public, including especially institutional investors, who would then wait for repayment over time. But it was going to be very sticky. So what they have done is perhaps the best, and I think that by that singular approval, they have tried to sign off against that. And let me tell you this, that it's also not a big deal that such an amount will be reclassified in the books of a bank. When the U.S. spent $4.6 trillion on COVID alone, Nigeria spent about 30 to 40 billion. And if you convert that 30 to 40 billion dollars is 20 trillion. So begin to think about the amount of money that is in the Ways and Means account. So it's about 20 trillion. So, but what they did, like in the UK, the $430 billion they spend, once they spend those monies, when they issue the bonds, the Bank of England buys the bonds, and the money it shows up in the book of the Bank of England. I think that we should not constrict ourselves too much. And I also think that the 5% of last year's revenue that's recommended in the law is rather low. I think that we should give ourselves an opportunity for this economy to grow. That's my position on that.
And on the strength of that question, the incoming administration may be inheriting debt to the tune of 77 trillion naira. That's if you add the Ways and Means request to a debt stock of 44 trillion naira already. And it's coming with a lot of promises. They're going to do this and they're going to do that. And, you know, it's also reminiscent of the Edo State governor's warning that, you know, by the end of June, inevitably government will have to start printing money to pay salaries. So amid all of this, what in your own view should be the position of labor and civil society with regards, you know, to the issue of fuel subsidy, you know, for instance, in the light of the revenue challenge of government?
Thank you. But you know, first of all, I usually disagree with Obaseki's views. I think his views are rather too far rightist for me, economically speaking. This is not investment banking. This is the lives of people. So, but however, that said, you know, I think that also I read somewhere where 13 local governments generated 3 million naira in Edo State over a 6 months period. So everybody needs to get serious about generating revenue in order to be able to pay the salaries of their staff. You know, we haven't actually started running this economy. 77 trillion naira, which over our GDP, our GDP is about anything between 200 trillion to 230 trillion, which translates to almost $500 million, okay? So 77 over 200 is about 35%. Let's call it 35%. The truth is, when I looked at it and I went back and studied economic history as it pertains to the debts of nations, I found out that Nigeria has not started. The only reason why Nigeria will not be able to raise even more money anywhere, especially local bonds, I don't favor foreign because of the exchange risk which we are seeing now. We went down the foreign debt route under Kemi Adeosun full blast. But we want then that there will be a point at which the monies that we borrowed at 199 naira to $1, if we have to pay back today, we will pay at least 460 official rate, meaning that we have to tax our people times 3. You know, and God knows where the rate is going, but we hope that the rate can be managed, you know. Again, I must quickly say again, I'll keep giving this warning, that if the government is going to remove subsidy, the incoming government, they must find a way of ensuring that the naira is not the value. Because when Buhari removed subsidy, actually in 2016, when fuel went from 87 naira to 145 naira, the mistake they did was to devalue the naira from 199 to 360, meaning that the 145 naira went back to the same dollar value that 87 was. And so it went back to 40 cents. And at the end of the day, NNPC started accruing, you know, what they call under recovery, which was another subsidy. So essentially speaking, 77 is, if we're talking about 35% of debt to GDP, we have an opportunity to raise even more debt comparatively. Angola is sitting on 100% debt to GDP, Ghana 100%, Kenya's 80%, Egypt 80%, UK 110%, US 130%, Japan 260%, Greece 260%, France 160%, Italy 180%. The only reason you will not raise more debt is if you have no idea what to do with money. Now look at Nigeria and tell me that we don't have anything to do with money. Our people are suffering. We need infrastructure. We need to build a real economy. We need to incentivize the industrial sector. So why then would we say that we cannot raise money? So, of course, the problem we have is that we always would wait until disaster before we go and raise money, and we'll spend the money and fritter it away on managing disaster, on corruption, on accountability. But if we have a proper plan, and I'm hoping that the incoming administration has a proper plan and you know, have a collegiate system of thinkers in government, there's so much, and we would actually begin to start this economy. There's a lot to do. We can incentivize the agricultural sector, value add, incentivize people who want to invest in that sector, who want to add value to all of the products that we sell in this country, so that we begin to talk about a proper economy going forward. Okay. I see it as opportunity. I don't see it as much of a threat for now.
Dr. Fashua, real quick, in like 10 seconds.
Right.
One word of advice for the government, present and incoming.
This government, the word of advice as it pertains to this is they should forget that idea. They shouldn't further just continue to anger Nigerians who are, many Nigerians are very emotional about this issue. No need to continue to rub, to salt to the injury. For the incoming government, be very collegiate. We hope that they're going to be running a very intellectual government where all of these issues will be properly discussed. People with ideas will come on board and also get ideas from the members of the public. The CSOs and co should continue to do their work to ensure that the government stay on the straight and narrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We've been speaking with Dr. Tokpe Fashua, economist, public policy scholar, and in 2019 presidential candidate, Abundant Nigeria Renewal Party. Thank you for coming in this morning.
You're welcome, sir.
And that's the show this morning. But before we sign out, we'll see what some of you have sent in your own comments. I have this one from Professor Imonoka Inakina Jr. He says, it is voodoo economics for a deliberating economy like us to continue to borrow money that would have been used to invest in real sector, the SMEs and power, and reflate an economy that is monotonous, and 65% of our income is expended on fuel subsidy and the remaining 35% is expended on recurrent expenditure while we continue to borrow for capital projects, loan repayments and debt servicing.
Well, Yang Phillips says, for about 8 years, subsidy couldn't be removed. Subsidy to be removed after your administration, June 2023, and yet $800 million loan is about to be collected 17 days to the end of your government.
Well, this one is from Festus Akimboyewa, who says, well, there is nothing wrong in APC nominating candidates to preside over the incoming 10th National Assembly. They should not impose candidates on the National Assembly. The APC must be careful not to turn their victory into chaos because of fighting over who should lead the 10th National Assembly. Nothing should stop the National Assembly from starting their work or delay the swearing in of returning members and freshmen.
All right, this one here now. We will have a stable and better National Assembly when elected members are allowed to decide who their presiding officers should be, and such an assembly may be able to carry out the functions of the National Assembly better in oversighting the executive and its agencies, but not when the executive appoints leaders for the National Assembly based on who voted for the president. The National Assembly members elect should resist imposition that will make its leadership rubber stamp in the hand of the president. That's coming from Dixon Eka. And that is Sunrise Daily for today. I want to thank you for letting us be a part of your morning. We wish you a fantastic rest of the day. I'm Neota Ibe.
Yes, indeed. I heard somewhere, that there's nothing wrong with Nigeria that cannot be made right by what is right with Nigeria. So make the best of what you have today. Thank you for watching. I am Bukola Koka.
I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful day. Hello, good morning, and welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Olumide Macaulay. The headlines. Drone strike hits Russia's Belgorod and Bryansk regions. NATO top official Admiral Rob Burr says the body is not making military plans against Beijing. Plus, Turkish Prime Minister says Black Sea grain deal could be extended for 2 months. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Belgorod governor, the name of Vyacheslav Gladkov, says additional drone attacks were conducted over Russia's Belgorod region on the border with Ukraine. He said 2 drones detonated and fell over a residential area in the region, adding that no casualties were reported, but 2 residential buildings and a car were damaged. The governor said another drone was shot down by Russian air defense systems over the region, and response teams are assessing the aftermath on the ground. On the other hand, Bryansk governor Alexander Bokomaz says a drone strike hit Bryansk, another Russian region, on the Ukraine border. He says that there were no casualties and that an administrative building was struck in Stardub, adding that response teams are working on site. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces are conducting effective counterattacks in the Bakhmut area. That's according to the commander of the Ukrainian Land Forces. Colonel General Alexander Syrskyi said on a Telegram post, which reads, "Thanks to our well-thought-out defense in the Bakhmut sector, we're getting results from the effective actions of our units. In particular, we are conducting effective counterattacks. In some areas of the front, the enemy was unable to withstand the onslaught of Ukrainian defenders and retreated to a distance of up to 2 kilometers. The post continued despite a significant concentration of troops and loud statements by Russian war criminals about their intentions to take Bakhmut by May the 9th. The enemy failed to capture the Ukrainian city. It says our defense forces are holding the front line securely and preventing the enemy from advancing." NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says the alliance needed to ramp up its weapon production as he opened a meeting of defense chiefs. Since the start of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, NATO has asked its members to raise their ammunition stockpiles, which have been badly depleted, with allies trying to put arms supplies to Kyiv and their own militaries on a sustainable footing. Even before the war, many NATO countries fell short of meeting the alliance's stockpiling targets, as officials considered wars of attrition with large-scale artillery battles a thing of the past.
I also expect that leaders will endorse a new NATO Defence Production Action Plan to ensure that NATO continues to have the capabilities we need. We need that investment